Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out, and we get amazing guests on this show, so you always want to share. I'm excited for our guest today, Dr. Christine. I just met her. She met in the RTA Syndicate, also like a lot of my guests on here. And she's well, let's just say, I would say, she'd probably hate it if I say this, but really smart. She's a professor. She's got her PhD. She's got her RN. She's like, man, this lady's educated. But even cooler, she really wants to help people. And so last couple of years, she started an elite health coaching business, helping women that are perimenopausal to menopausal and beyond navigate that stuff, which I'm intrigued by. So I don't know anything about this stuff. But welcome to the show, Christine.
Thank you, Angela. I'm really excited to be here. Hopefully we can add some value to your listeners and have them leave with some really good information.
I love it. So let's go back. What got you into like down the track that you went, like getting your PhD, getting your RN? Like what got you into the health world and then the professor world? Like tell us a little bit about like where you came from and where you are.
So I've always been an athlete. I've always been strong and healthy. And my passion for helping others started as a registered nurse. And I went on to get my doctorate so that I could teach. And so I am a full professor and I teach mostly nurse practitioner students. But what I noticed with myself, so I'm 50 years old, was when I was in my like early 40s, I just started to feel like complete garbage. And I went on this quest to understand from a scientific point of view, like what was happening to my body. And then how do I fix it? And how do I really optimize my health and well-being? So that was kind of my quest. I was able to transform my health and I got rid of these like 20 pounds that I just had no business holding on to. And my goal is to live a really long, healthy, functional life, well beyond 100, so that like my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids, like have the best me to help guide them and take care of them. And I've been able to share this with, lots of other women who just feel kind of discouraged and not sure what to do.
That's awesome. Very cool. And so what are some of the things that you have found? I guess let's get into it. What are some of the things that you found that help people? And what does perimenopausal mean? And how do we how do we help ourselves through some of this stuff?
Yeah, good question. So there's like three unfortunate things that happen to women as they get older. The first one that starts around the age of 35 is your body is making a lot less estrogen. Estrogen is your strength and vitality hormone for women. So as that starts to go down, you really start to feel the negative impacts. The other thing that happens is once you're menopausal, which means you stop making estrogen, you stop having a cycle, you're going to gain 4 pounds every year unintentionally, just by virtue of the fact that your metabolism is slowed down. So if you don't do something about it,
Wow, I'm lucky. I feel really blessed right now. I feel like I've actually lost weight. So this is awesome.
yeah, well, because you probably do all the right things. And then the last, thing that happens is for every decade after you're 40 years old, you lose 8% of your muscle mass. So muscle is your longevity organ. If you don't have enough muscle on your frame, you are going to have problems with balance and coordination, mobility, and your bones are going to get weaker. So there's so many important reasons why you want to be very proactive as you hit 35 and beyond.
Wow. Okay, cool. That's awesome. So what are some things that are proactive that women can do to help to build muscle and or not gain fat? I don't know, or gain weight, I guess, or whatever you want to put it. What are some tangible things that women could do that are, I guess, simple, but like really practical and helpful?
Yeah, great question. So most people's goal is to just change their body composition. So get rid of that extra body fat and improve your skeletal lean muscle. And if you ever go to the gym, Angela, you'll see these people and they're like on the elliptical forever and they're, on the spinner. And
I get exhausted. I'm like, what are they doing?
right? But they're really kind of wasting their time. So what I do is I program very efficient 45-minute strength training sessions that really focus on building lean skeletal muscle mass and decreasing body fat. But if you're not fueling your body appropriately, you can lift all the weights that you want. It's not going to be optimized. So, in addition to being smart with how you move your body, you've got to be really smart in how you fuel your body. And most women 35 and beyond aren't consuming nearly enough protein. So, it's helping them understand, okay, what is protein? Where do you get it? And how can you get enough of it in your fueling plan so that you're able to build lean muscle mass? And then the last one is mindset. If your mind isn't in the game and you are not completely committed and disciplined, then you're not going to be successful, because I'll be honest with you, this stuff gets old. It gets tedious, right? So you develop these habits that will turn into those I am statements. I am strong. I am athletic. I am somebody that prioritizes my health and fitness. Once you're able to make that switch in your mindset, the rest of it is just on autopilot. Like, you know what to do, and now it's just part of who you are.
Where does this is kind of random, but something I've been like on, so I'm curious. Where do carbs fit into this?
Yeah, so carbohydrates have been villainized for years. You know, you hear, oh, carbs are bad, and carbs make you fat. Carbohydrates are your main fueling source. So you have got to incorporate good, healthy carbohydrates into your fueling plan. So I'm a big fan of making sure you get enough fiber. I think fiber is critical to make sure that your gut microbiome is healthy. And so I incorporate a lot of like cruciferous vegetables, potatoes, rice. I do a lot of seeds. So hemp seeds, chia seeds, basil seeds, sesame seeds, flax seeds. Seeds are like magic when it comes to trying to optimize and balance your hormones. So carbs are your friend. I love fruit. I love vegetables. I eat all the carbs. And I think that's a big mistake people make, is they're like, oh, carbs are bad, don't eat them. Yeah, you will lose weight, but it is not sustainable to live the rest of your life without carbohydrates.
So I'm curious your thoughts. This is good. This is my new podcast, so I want to learn on myself.
Yeah.
So right now, and you might not know this, but I'm just curious. So I'm 41. So I'm kind of in that, I don't know where I'm at, but somewhere in there. And also have MS, as you know. And so I'm on what am I on? I'm on a well, it's a Wells protocol diet, but it's kind of like a paleo kind of diet. So vegetables, lots of like 9 cups of fruit and vegetables a day is what I'm supposed to be eating.
But
I don't necessarily get that much. And then like 6 to 12 ounces of meat a day, which don't always get that much, but I try. And that's basically it. So I don't have potatoes, which is my favorite food, by the way. I don't have any wheat. I don't have any grains. I don't have any eggs. I don't have any, like, that's what they cut me out.
mhm.
And I'm just curious, like, it was funny because I just was working with a personal trainer and he's like, how do you not have any like bread or like potatoes or like any carbs really? And I'm like, I don't know, I just don't. I'm like, fine. But I'm curious what because yeah, it's interesting you say that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you are having carbs, right? If you're having 9
Okay.
servings of fruit and vegetables a day, you're having plenty of carbohydrates. I
Okay.
think, when you think about MS, it's an autoimmune disease related to inflammation. So it makes sense that you would not have wheat in your diet because it's so pro-inflammatory.
Hmm.
Eggs
Okay.
are a lot of people don't tolerate eggs, and so they cause a lot of inflammation. So
I miss
you're
eggs.
doing, yeah, right. But you find alternatives. So I think the big thing is, okay, this is how I'm eating. I'm really getting rid of all the stuff that causes a lot of inflammation. And I need to make sure I get enough protein. And that's where I would just look
Protein.
at what your fueling in is and trying to make sure that you don't lose any muscle, as you're working with your trainer, and making sure that you're as metabolically healthy as possible. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't eat any gluten. It is very pro-inflammatory. It makes me feel like I have brain fog. I do eat eggs, but not a ton. They're just not my favorite food. But for me, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, purple potatoes, yams, like those are all things that I eat
Sweet
quite
potato.
a bit of. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can eat those ones. Okay, interesting. That's awesome. And a lot of women, I've heard this. This isn't something personally, but I've heard this on other podcasts and just talking. So when you talk about like building the muscle, a common thing that I'm sure you've had, so I'm going to bring it up because I'm sure other people have it, is, I don't want to become bulky. So a lot of women,
Right.
like you said, are on the treadmill or the leaf elliptical or whatever for like hours, or whatever, but they're not really at the like weight machines. And
Yeah.
and so what are your thoughts on that? And what, if someone's like listening to this and they're like, well, I don't want to be bulky. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very common misconception. It is so difficult to build lean muscle, especially when you're above the age of 40, that unless you were all in with somebody who's getting you ready to be like on a bikini stage, it's nearly impossible to become bulky. And the way that I program most of my clients is we do hypertrophy specific training where you're doing like 4 sets. Your first set is like 20 reps. I think of it as like a warm up set, right? Like get the blood flow. We're not doing like, until you like are ready to collapse. So I think it's the way that you train, but I would just remind people it is almost impossible to bulk up without being super intentional.
Awesome. What are some, now going back to like, I don't know, vitamins, I guess that's the word. Are there certain vitamins that people should be taking when they're like in that 35 to 45 and then 45 and like, I don't know, specific age range that you really think are really important for helping through all of this stuff for women?
Yeah, I mean, the rabbit hole of supplementation, you can go way deep down in there. So I work with First Form, and I have most of my clients on Microfactor, which is their packet of everything you need in one little plastic packet. And it's got your multivitamins, antioxidants, probiotics, fish oil, coenzyme Q10, and like everything you need is right there. Because you can waste a lot of money on supplements. All of my clients are on two other things that I think are critical: creatine and collagen. Creatine is the most studied supplement to help promote building muscle. And again, it's not going to turn you into a bodybuilder by any means, but having 2.5 to 5 grams daily of creatine to me is a no brainer. It has been shown to be very safe and effective. Collagen protein is another no-brainer in my opinion. So I use First Form's collagen, the unflavored, and I put one scoop in my coffee every day. That's 15 grams of protein that really helps support your connective tissue, your tendons, your cartilage. People with arthritis, collagen is a dream. And you don't even really know it's in your coffee. It's there because it's completely, just what's the word I'm looking for? Dissolvable. And that's one of the things, like if I'm trying to hit my protein goal every day, I've got to get the collagen in.
Hey, my mom has that. I'm not on that. So it's good. I should start that.
Something to think about. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like that. And so, what are some of the, I don't know, emotional things that women go through? And, we talked about this before, so I'm curious, like the people in their life. So we got guys listening to this, they're like, oh, this doesn't even involve me. Yeah, it does if you're married,
Yeah.
or with someone, or have a mom, or have a sister, or have whatever. What are some emotional things that women are going through that, they need to understand to accept it and go through it? And then people around them to also know a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So, in addition to the physical changes that occur if you don't do anything about it, it's these psychological things that are happening under the surface. Women become much more irritable. Oh, you're a bitch. Um, Cranky, less joyful. We get brain fog. And I don't know about you, but if you're a high functioning person, brain fog is the last thing that you want to deal with. You feel like you're a psychopath half of the time. And then, as far as intimacy, if you're married, your desire for sex goes down significantly as your estrogen goes down. It's your primary sexual intimate hormone. And if that takes a nosedive, it's going to have negative implications on your relationships. So these are things you've really got to think about. Like if I have a partner or a parent or a sister who's in perimenopause, and you've noticed like things are changing, it's because they are. And I think the good news is you don't have to just accept that for this is how my life is going to be forever.
So what are some things that could help? So you mentioned like sex drive going down and I don't think we've talked about sex on this show yet. Yay. All
Good.
right, so let's bring it. So talked about that because I think that's an important part of, especially like I said, in marriage. How can a woman work on that to raise it? I guess that's the right word. I mean, like, yeah, partners like you have to understand it, but like it is an important thing. So is there things that they can do or implement that could help raise it even as they don't feel like it? Because it makes sense. Estrogen goes down, sex drive goes down. It's like testosterone goes down, sex drive goes down. They're connected. So makes sense. What are some ways to raise it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. Number one, and you mentioned testosterone. So when you think about like the hormones that change during perimenopause and menopause, the three big players are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Estrogen and testosterone are your primary sex hormones. And for females, if you haven't checked your testosterone levels, you probably want to see what's going on there. But the more muscle you put on your body, the more active you are secreting these sex hormones. So your estrogen and your testosterone will improve by virtue of improving your muscle, your lean muscle mass. So that's one. Number two, exercise. Exercise is your feel good, it releases your endorphins. If you feel more confident about yourself, you are much more likely to get naked and have fun with your spouse or your partner. So you've got to feel good on the inside. The last thing I would say is talk to your provider about hormone replacement therapy. That is something that has had so many mixed messages around. You know, back in the 90s, they did the Women's Health Initiative that showed that if you take hormones, you're going to get breast cancer. But what people now understand is that population of women in that study were quite old. They were in their late 60s and they were given estrogen derived from horse urine. Well, that's probably not such a great idea. And there was a bump in the incidence of breast cancer. Now we are creating and make readily available bioidentical estrogen, which mimics the estrogen that maybe your ovaries aren't making. So that's a conversation you want to have with your healthcare provider. But you know, those three things, or even two out of the three, will improve your intimacy and your relationships.
Okay, that's awesome. I love that. Now I'm curious about you. As you have you gone through this journey and gone from like all the education, all the things, just like, you know, because I always love asking this, was everyone in your life really supportive of everything you've done? And if so, that's great. And if not, you know, how did you just decide to do things, whether they necessarily approved of it or not?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My husband, we've been married for 23 years. He is like my biggest cheerleader. And trust me, he directly benefits from all of this. So he's happy. And we also have teenagers who you role model by example. So they've seen what I've done over the last, 8 to 10 years in transforming my own health. And they are also very physically active people. So everything that you guys do, people are watching you and they're paying attention. Now, in my work life, university life, some people were like, well, what is she doing? Like, how is she doing all this? And I just block out that noise because I know that I am helping so many people to achieve optimal health that I can't worry about, what the unhealthy or maybe, jealous people think about my pathway and my purpose that extends beyond the world of academia. Like that can never be a variable in choosing the path that you want to walk on.
It's good. Yes. Let it all go. Let the noise go and build your own life. I love that.
That's right.
Um, yeah. I'm just curious, like a lot of people listen to this show, I would say would be high achievers, and I've heard this recently, like whenever it's, time of the month before that you've got, and I'm not very good at this, but your body, you don't want to push your body the same ways you do maybe the rest of the time. Like there's times you're supposed to actually like slow down a little bit in a month. And I don't, like I said, don't really do any of this stuff. But like, what are your thoughts on that? And how does that, how do you navigate that? Because you're a high achiever. If you do change it all throughout the month.
Yeah, so I haven't had a period in several years. So for me, I don't exactly know, but it never bothered me either. I was always that person, like I never had PMS. I never, nothing, it just life kind of went on. And it's interesting. I think sometimes we pay too much attention to our cycle and people, you know, kind of like use that as a crutch, like, oh, I have my period, I'm so blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I gotta do the thing, right? But physiologically, paying attention to your cycle is important because you want to notice if it starts to change, right? If your cycle becomes less frequent, changes in duration and intensity, those are signals that you are starting to go through perimenopause. Other things to pay attention to are any symptoms, hot flashes, weight gain, sleep disturbances, mood disturbances, brain fog, all of those things. So I don't necessarily change what I do depending on where I'm at in my cycle. I think it just depends, you know, some people it handle it very differently. But either way, like you've got to execute every day regardless of what's going on. So you've got to figure out how to do that.
Okay, and a question on that. As we went through that, I'm curious your thoughts on this. How do you feel birth control impacts someone if, you know, throughout their life, and then does it impact their actual going into menopause at all? Do you feel there's a difference on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The science right now on the birth control pill is fascinating. And I have a teenage daughter, so I've been sharing this with her and her friends so that they understand that, you know, taking the birth control pill for 20 years is probably not in your best interest, because if you think about it, you're suppressing hormones that are secreted like from your brain, and you're messing up that whole thing. So I'm all about like pregnancy prevention and, you know, making sure you don't have an unwanted pregnancy. But you also want to make sure that you're being very thoughtful about the chemicals that you're putting in your body and how they're going to interact long term. I have some clients who've never had a period because they've had IUDs, they've had, you know, they've been on the pill forever. And it's hard to tell, right, if your body is naturally going through menopause or not, because we have been suppressing ovulation this whole time. So I think we're gonna like look back someday and be like, wow, the birth control pill, that was really interesting. But right now, you know, it's one of the most popular options to prevent an unwanted pregnancy.
Well, and even outside of that, so I mean, personal, everyone here, now you'll know my whole story. So I've been on birth control my whole adult life, and not for birth control. I'm pretty safe on that level. That's not happening. I know what it causes. That ain't happening. So that's good. However, I went on it because I had a terrible, my periods were terrible as a child. I started at 11 and I'd be puking every month. And it was terrible. So as soon as I turned 18, they said this would help. I went on it. It helped. I had no more pain the rest of my life. And so I'm not on it for quote birth control. I'm on it for regulation. But then I've heard all this stuff and I'm like, but I'm like, I'm not going off it. Cause like I said, I remember that even though it was 20 something years ago and it's traumatic and I don't ever want to do that again. I hated being a female. So for people like that, what are your thoughts?
I think that as long as you're taking care of the rest of your body, right? You're fueling well, you're moving your body well, then there are things that you have to do in order to be functional. It's like having, right? It's like having to take antidepressants or medication for migraines or, you know, anything else. It's just like part of what you need to do in order to function. And, you know, you've got to weigh the pros and the cons of all of these decisions. And, you know, look at you, Angela, you're thriving. So you made a great choice.
I appreciate that. What are some things that, like you said, it does like change it, obviously, and I understand that. So what would menopause be different, you feel like have you seen the people that are on it? What's the difference in how they do start to negotiate into menopause? Because you said like sometimes it's not as noticeable because you've
Right.
kept things different the whole time. So I mean, you still have a period and stuff, but like, what are some things that are different that you would say? So as I go into this, what am I looking for?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question because, you know, we tell you to pay attention to any changes in symptoms in your body, but if you're on birth control, you probably don't have any. So in a way, you're muting what maybe you would experience. So that's a good thing, right?
Could
And
be.
if you think about it, birth control and hormone replacement therapy are very similar in concept. It's just the dose is different. So you could very easily transition, with your provider off of birth control and onto hormone replacement and skip all the bad stuff altogether. And that would be something that I would definitely explore, potentially go off of it for a couple of months just to see what your baseline estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are.
Mhm.
And then, hop on the hormone replacement pathway and, not have all of the deleterious side effects and skip the weight gain part and the brain fog part and all of those things. So I think, those are some really great options to avoid, some of the things that most people are dealing with.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, we went through a lot today. And like I said, I like to keep it short and sweet, but always ask three final questions and then anything we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners. So first and final question is if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
So for me, it's life begins at 50. And I feel like that notion that everything starts to decline, you retire, you end up just sitting around is complete nonsense. And I feel like you can continue to reinvent yourself regardless of your chronologic age, but getting your health in check is important in order to do that.
Awesome. Second question, what's a favorite quote and why?
Ooh, I didn't prepare for this one. I love the quote that life begins when you get outside of your comfort zone. And I feel like continuing to push yourself into these positions where you're very uncomfortable is so important. And that's where the growth happens. And that's what I challenge myself and all of you guys to do is just keep stepping into those uncomfortable spaces. And even if you feel like you really don't belong.
Love that. And third and final question, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Ooh, awesome mom.
Ooh, I love it. Very cool. All right, you're running some in the coffee shop, and they're like, Dr. Christine, that was awesome. I'm going to be working out more. I'm working on my diet, all the things we talked about. What's something, though, we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
I mean, we covered quite a bit, but
We
I
try.
think that, yeah, I know, right? I think that just understanding that like your health, your fitness, your nutrition is a 360-degree approach. And you've got to do all three. You've got to have the mindset, you've got to have the nutrition, and you've got to have the movement. And if you can synergistically combine those, like sky's the limit in terms of what's possible. And that's why I'm so excited about doing this work.
I love that. Super awesome. Guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. Some women that, are going through this or you are, or whatever, share it. This is good stuff. And definitely we'll have all of Christine's information in the show notes. Reach out to her. I know she's happy to help. That's what she's doing this for. So definitely reach out. If we can go out there and change one life or one starfish at a time together, we can change the world. Thanks very much for being on.